I am Sapien. I am Black Sapien. Only a Sapien can define the elements that make up Sapien. I, Sapien, will define Black Sapien. In order to define who I am, I must first define what I am. But, to truly understand what I am, I must define and explain the components that make up who I am. The Black Sapien can be defined, in its totality, by the word being. The Sapien being exists as male and female. The male is designated king while the female is honored with the title of queen. The Black Sapien can be defined as being the combination of two elements. These two elements interact to cause function to the Sapien being. This is accomplished through the universal principle of duality. Duality is the principle that underlines all manifestations. The Black Sapien consists of a non-matter non-energy element that interfaces with its other primary element. The other component of the Sapien being's duality is a matter-energy element. Together, they combine to make a complete being. The non-matter element of the Black Sapien duality corresponds to the conscious element of Sapien, while the non-energy portion of this duality corresponds to the Sapien's will. The matter-energy element of Black Sapien represents the unconscious element of Sapien. It exists as a separate independent element of Black Sapien. The Black Sapien's consciousness and will, together, combine to create a unique self. The Sapien's self has identity that is affected and determined by the input of knowledge that its conscious element has received and processed. The Black Sapien's unconscious element has identity of, not self. The non-matter non-energy element of Sapien, that consists of its consciousness and will, combine to form the unique Black Sapien self, which identifies as I. The Black Sapien's unconscious elements combine to create the Black Sapien's, not self, which identifies as spirit. That, which says I am, is the Black Sapien's consciousness. To be aware, to know, to understand, is the state of being conscious. The non-matter conscious element of Black Sapien's self is receptive by nature of all forms of knowledge, and has the ability to process that same knowledge. The non-energy element, will, of the Black Sapien's self, is reactive, and reacts actively, to cause reactions. It must be understood that the Black Sapien exists as a being that is a combination of two distinct elements. The non-matter non-energy self, existing within the Black Sapien's non-self. That which says I, is conscious. I am, is the self-awareness of self, that identifies as I. The non-matter non-energy self is unique because of the following distinctions. It does not need sleep. It does not need food. It does not need air. It does not feel pain. It has no power in, or of, itself. The matter-energy element that embodies the Sapien consciousness and will, and also causes Black Sapien to move, is defined as vehicle. The vehicle is composed of both matter and energy. One element that makes up the Black Sapien's vehicle is the source of life that is within all living beings that have life. That element is defined by the term divine spirit. Another element of the Black Sapien's vehicle is an animation spirit. The mind is another part of the Black Sapien's vehicle. The vehicle also includes the Black Sapien's physical body. The divine spirit is the dominant element that exists within the Sapien's being. It provides the energy of life to the Sapien's vehicle. The divine spirit equals power, which equals life. The divine spirit operates under universal laws that were created during the creation of all things. The divine spirit alone controls all human systems of Black Sapien. The divine spirit gives function to the animation spirit. The animation spirit causes motion to the elements that it animates. The animation spirit gives function to the following elements: the Black Sapien's mind, and the Black Sapien's physical body. The Black Sapien's mind desires food. The food it desires is knowledge. The Black Sapien's body desires food also. And the food it desires are nutrients. The brain. It's the mind, consciousness, will, interface, of the Black Sapien. The brain accepts and processes input from external sources. The brain interfaces with the mind, consciousness and will, which then produces an output. Input comes from external sources perceived and received through the Black Sapien's senses. These input sources can be defined as words or fruit. The Black Sapien functions best when the input is of a truthful nature. The interface will also function if the input is not of a truthful nature. If truth is inputted into the Black Sapien's consciousness, the output must be truth also. But if the input is not of a truthful nature, the output will be non-truth. Like the input, the output would be defined as words, or fruits. When truth is the source of input into the black sapien's consciousness, that truth causes function to the sapien's will. The will then has the ability to output truth. Thus truth, which is power, is the output of the black sapien's will. Non-truth cannot produce power, thus rendering the words of the will to be powerless, and thus will not cause function. When the will speaks words of truth, these words of truth cause function of the Divine Spirit. The Divine Spirit responds to the words of truth or power by giving function to the animation spirit of the black sapien. The animation spirit is the spirit that causes motion and function within the black sapien. Only when truth is received by the black sapien's consciousness, does the sapien's will have power to command the Divine Spirit to give function to the animation spirit, to do. Understand this, truth equals power. When non-truth is received by the sapien's consciousness, it has no power from the input. Remember this, power in equals power out. This means that the will does not have a source of power, and cannot command the Divine Spirit to give function to the animation spirit, to do. Understand this. Non-truth equals non-power. The black sapien's mind desires food, and that food is knowledge. The black sapien's will desires words of truth, thus giving a power source to the will. Feeding the black sapien's physical body. The black sapien's physical body is composed of the following elements: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, calcium, phosphorus, and trace elements. Mother Earth assists the black sapien with the consumption of several important elements, through the Earth's naturally occurring cycles. These cycles are, the nitrogen cycle, the phosphorus cycle, and the Arcadian sleep cycle. The nutrients that are needed to feed the black sapien's body are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen and calcium, nitrates, phosphates, and trace elements. The nitrogen cycle explained. The black sapien's physical body does not absorb nitrogen in its raw form efficiently, it uses the Earth's nitrogen cycle for the consumption of nitrogen. Nitrogen from the air is absorbed by the Earth's soil. The soil converts the nitrogen into nitrates that the plants consume. When the black sapien consumes the plants, it in turn consumes the nitrates. The black sapien's body then converts the nitrates into nitrogen when needed. The phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus is never found on Earth in its natural raw form. Phosphorus is present as phosphates in compound elements in the soil. The plants consume the phosphates, and when the sapien eats the plants, it consumes the phosphates. The black sapien's body will convert the phosphates into phosphorus, as needed. The Acadian sleep cycle. The black sapien, by nature, follows the Acadian sleep cycle. Before sunset, the black sapien starts to produce melatonin. This causes the sapien to fall asleep. While asleep, the black sapien's body repairs itself. Before the sun rises, the body stops producing melatonin so the body can wake. The black sapien's body can only repair itself during its sleep cycle. The black sapien exists because of its creation from a unique duality. This duality created black sapien from two elements that are opposites by nature. One element is composed of non-matter non-energy, while the other element is a composition of matter-energy. Thus the black sapien is a being that is composed of two different distinct elements. One element, which is composed of non-matter non-energy, is in fact a duality of the black sapien's consciousness and its will. Together they function as a single element that is known to the black sapien as self, and identifies as I. Because the black sapien's self is composed of non-matter non-energy, it exists as a passive element. This means that the black sapien's self needs input first in order to start function of its consciousness. The conscious receives input from external sources. It then processes and stores the input. This, in turn, starts the active element, the black sapien's will, to respond with output derived from its input source. Because of the passive nature of the sapien's consciousness, its consciousness is reactive, and can only output that which has been processed from its input source. When the input source is of a truthful nature, the output will also be of a truthful nature. But when the input is not truth, the output also is not truth. If the Black Sapien's input source is of a truthful nature, it will cause a reaction within the Black Sapien's consciousness. This is because truth is a source, or transmitter of power. Thus, the input of words of truth equals the input of words of power. When these words of power are processed by the Black Sapien's consciousness, these words of power gives power to the Sapien's will to output words of power. These words of power from the Black Sapien's will gives function to the Black Sapien's divine spirit, which in turn gives function to the Sapien's animation spirit to do. This is life. But, if the Black Sapien's input source is of a non-truthful nature, there is no input of power, thus the conscious element of the Black Sapien's self is unable to give function to the Sapien's will, which in turn does not give function to the divine spirit. This gives the animation spirit no function from the divine spirit. Thus, the Black Sapien functions off the animation spirit, which can only give function to the mind and physical body to eat. Without function from the divine spirit, the Black Sapien is left to wander aimlessly in search of food. This leads to death.